Welcome back to the Deepfake Dialogues. Today I'm speaking with Noelle Martin, an Australian lawyer and a prominent survivor advocate who has spent years fighting for legal reforms around non-consensual intimate image abuse. Since she was a teenager, Noelle has been the target of perpetrators creating and distributing fake intimate images and deepfake videos of her without consent. She's taken that harrowing experience and turned it into a fight for justice. Just a note before we begin, this episode involves frank discussions regarding non-consensual intimate imagery and sexual abuse. Hi, Noelle. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your willingness to join this podcast and shed light on such an important issue. As you know, this is a podcast about... Absolutely. As you know, this is a podcast about deepfakes and their impact on society. So the use of deepfakes to create non-consensual intimate imagery, also known as NCII, is something I definitely want to address here, especially given how large this issue has become. I was shocked recently to learn that 96 to 98% of all deepfake content that exists online consists of NCII, with virtually all victims being women. So I'm really grateful that you're here to discuss this with me today in the context of your own personal journey and experiences. So let's dive in. So take us back to 2013-ish. So you were 18 years old, a law student, and like many of us, you decided to Google yourself just for kicks. Can you walk us through that specific moment when the results loaded? What did you see and what was your reaction?
Yeah, so I just randomly decided to Google myself, and in an instant I saw dozens upon dozens of search results that had my images on porn sites, and these sites had like my identifiable information, and the more I looked, the more I found out that they had like Photoshop doctored intimate images of me on these sites, and as I kept looking, the more sites I found, and it was multiple search pages of results too, and it was just like that moment single-handedly changed the course of my life.
And also, just to clarify, were these photos that were doctored, where were they taken from? Were they taken from your social media?
Yes, they were taken from my social media, but they were also taken from like events that I went to like as a young woman, and like there's a uni bar that I would go to, and there would be like the photographer for the event, and then they would take photos and post it on like a Facebook albums. So it would be my social media posts, it would be also photos of me elsewhere, and then sometimes like I recall it would be from even friends' accounts. So it was like as much information that they could get of me, and that like formed the basis of what they were using.
Okay. And what did you do in the immediate aftermath of discovering these manipulated images of you online? And what was your family's reaction when you shared this with them?
So, I mean, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what the term was to describe what was even happening to me. I hadn't ever heard about this happening to anyone. I didn't know like who was responsible, why. So of course I did go to the police. Of course I tried calling around, like seeing who to contact. In my head it was like cybercrime, some sort of cybercrime. I looked at trying to get a private investigator. But, I couldn't afford that, so I didn't pursue that. But ultimately, at the time, and even for a lot of years post that, there were no specific laws that dealt with this. It wasn't dominating the media. There wasn't really much I could do. And I did tell my family. It took me a while to tell my family. I think, from my recollection, it would have been about a year into what was happening that I told my family. And I remember vividly the conversation. It was just like, Dad, like, this is what's happening. And I didn't really go into it because I didn't want to go into it. But I think it was just like that conversation, and then we didn't talk about it for years after. So that was what the context was. And then effectively, a police officer told me that I should try and get the images removed myself, like contact the webmasters, and also like be careful what I post, kind of control my social media like settings. And so that's all I had to do, was go down the rabbit hole of trying to take it down myself. And that was a really hard lesson, because I learned very quickly how futile that was for me.
Yeah, for sure. And so were you ultimately able to get these images removed? And what was that process like?
So it was such a painful process. No, I've not been able to get them all removed, and I don't even look and I don't even check what's out there anymore. I did try, and there were times where I was successful. Then there were times when I was successful and then the images came up again on the same site, or there were times where I couldn't find out who to contact, or there were times when they had asked for my ID to prove it was me, which is again ironic because they didn't require my ID to post them in the first place, but then to take it down I needed to show proof. And then of course there was one time when I tried to get things down, and a perpetrator said that they would only remove them if I sent them nude photos of myself within 24 hours. So that was my experience with sexual extortion. But, as I'm even recounting this, it's exhausting because it's like, when I think back now, by the time I actually found out what was happening, it was actually already too late to ever kind of actually remove it. Like, when I zoom out, it's like what had happened to me would already set the course of my life before I ever found out and before I ever even understood anything about the world. Because maybe even in a week since they first started targeting me, which would have been 17 years old, even then it would have been too late. Like, even if I found out sooner when they started, because things spread and because things are posted on multiple sites and they're seen by multiple people and they're saved and they're stored and they're, maybe screenshotted, and you don't know where it is. So when I think back, it's like, God, it was futile for me to even try. And so I did try, and then it dawned on me that I couldn't do it anymore, and then I've just given up. I don't try anymore, unless it's like a really big thing. I might try and get it removed, but I just can't have the energy. I don't have the energy to try anymore.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. And for a long time, you fought this privately. What was the specific turning point that made you decide to put your real name and face on this issue publicly? And was there a fear that speaking out would just draw more attention to the fake content? And how did you weigh that risk?
So I never ever thought that I would speak out publicly. Like, it was something that was not even a thought when, like, for a long period of time. And I don't know what specifically was the turning point. I can't really pinpoint the specific, I guess, turning point. But I think it was just a number of different factors that contributed to me just reaching a point when I had had enough. Like, the sexual extortion of that perpetrator, threatening me. Then it was realizing that I couldn't fight it on my own. It was realizing that this was happening to so many other people, and it wasn't talked about. That there wasn't justice. There was nothing. Like, I was just sitting on this big thing, and I needed people to know about it. I needed also to reclaim my name, because I was really worried about what this would mean for, like, my life and my future and my reputation, and going through this as a law student in a specific area that I was trying, that really cares about your reputation and your image and your name. So it was all these compounding factors that led me to speak out. And was I shit scared? Yes, I was. And in fact, my parents and my family didn't want me to speak out. They didn't want me to speak out because they knew, like, it was a really taboo issue, not even just with my family, but just in society in general. And keep in mind, this is pre-Me Too movement. And there is a massive difference about speaking out about sexual abuse pre and post Me Too movement. This was pre-Me Too movement. I was forced to, almost, because there was no other option. And so I spoke out, and I genuinely was so naive. I didn't expect what would come from that. And then, I dealt with what came from that.
Yeah, and so I believe that after you spoke out publicly for the first time, you were targeted again, and this time with a deepfake video rather than just images. And how did you feel about this escalation? Do you think that this was a deliberate attempt to silence you?
Yeah, so when I spoke out, obviously my story went all over the world. I got so much hate and victim blaming and slut shaming. But it didn't stop the perpetrators. It wasn't just images and then the deepfakes. It was just consistently escalating in different forms, the kinds of abuse, like from solo shots to depictions of me in gangbangs, to me being ejaculated on fake adult, movie covers, and then it came to them creating videos of me, and there was a deepfake created of me with my full name in the title, and they had like the tags on the below saying, my full name, feminist, Australia, Desi, and then they had also created a cheap fake of me as well, which I just hate the terminology, but it's like a cruder version of a deep fake. And it was me performing oral sex. And so they kept targeting me. And even to this day, I still get, like, notifications, or someone tells me about something. Like, I had a fake account recently created of me depicting me on OnlyFans, as if I was on OnlyFans. And another thing that I found out was that someone had created a fake deepfake generator of me. And so it was like, create my name deepfake. And this is also something that's coming up, where individual generators of people are being created. But I don't think mine worked. But still, it was really, it's dangerous that this can happen. So why I think they escalated it, I think they escalated it probably for a number of reasons. They knew I would be speaking out because sometimes the images of me in the media were being used to create new like content, which is like they know full well what I'm doing. They know. So it was, I think, a shift in motivation. And for the perpetrators, it would have been, we're going to try and silence you. We're going to try and intimidate you. We're going to try and show you like what we can do. We don't give a crap if you're fighting this. We don't give a crap if you're fighting for law reform. We can still get away with it. You're not going to, so it was just this I think change in motivation that I'm inferring from the way that they targeted me. And that's the cost that I had to pay for speaking out.
Yeah. And so you've obviously been extremely active as an advocate for reforms. And you gave a powerful testimony regarding the deepfake sexual material bill that was passed in Australia in 2024 that criminalized the sharing of this material. And while you supported the bill, you've also been critical of aspects of it. Can you describe where you think it fell short?
Yeah, well, so this particular legal reform is like the latest iteration of a long journey of fighting for law reform because 2018, 2019, those years ish, I was involved in law reform and fighting for law reform in Australia that dealt with the distribution and the threatening to distribute and the recording of intimate images, including altered intimate images. So for a while there, Australia did have laws that tackled altered intimate images and actually would encompass like AI generated deepfakes. So I had some familiarity with laws that could potentially deal with this. These reforms focused on the partly the creation of this abuse because they were seeing a lot of the rise of these nudify apps that were making this abuse more accessible and easier to generate and create. So they did target in the act of creating and distributing at the same time, but they didn't have a standalone offense for the creation of this abuse. And that was a problem because the generation and the creation of this abuse is a violating act in and of itself. And if you really want to tackle this, you can't just focus on the distribution or threatening to distribute, like tackling this after the fact. Creating it on its own is a violating act, and it should be against the law. So the recent legislative reforms that you talked about went part way to tackle the creation, but they also coupled it with the creating and distributing at the same time, or like together. So failing to tackle creation on its own was a problem. But I think when I think about these reforms in the context of the fact that there were reforms that also existed before, you really see how little Australia can do to tackle this, because this is a global issue. This is a borderless issue. You're dealing with people who might target you halfway around the world. You're dealing with issues to do with how courts deal with it too. Do courts take it seriously? Do police take it seriously? You're dealing with issues to do with the fact that you've got an ecosystem now that exists. You've got these sites being promoted on social media sites. You've got them being discoverable on search engines. You've got payment processes such as the Visa and MasterCard facilitating the monetary exchange of this. This is so much bigger than what Australia can do. So you're starting to see, and I was starting to see really clearly, that the limitations of any of these laws are really huge when you're talking about an issue that transcends borders. And so, you know, I made that clear, and I have made that clear over the years that we're going to need a better approach that is international. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to provide any justice to victims.
Yeah, absolutely. And so recently, just a couple months ago, the Australian government announced its plans to ban deepfake nudify apps altogether. And just for context for listeners, these nudification apps are so they enable perpetrators to take a normal clothed photo of someone and use AI to generate a deepfaked nude photo or video of their body in seconds. And that's really led to an explosion of NCII abuse, and it's enabled this issue in a huge way. And I know that you just said that the government of Australia is limited in what it can do, and it takes a global response to combat this issue. But do you think that this is a step in the right direction, and what impact do you think this could have?
I mean, it is a step in the right direction. We need to tackle the sources of a lot of this abuse, and these apps and these like bespoke sources need to be rooted out. I think ultimately I have the same criticism as before, where you can introduce the laws all you want, but unless they are enforced, unless they are really dealt with on a global scale, I mean, what you're not really tackling this issue, because there are ways around it, and there are ways to access these kinds of apps if you wanted to, especially like using a VPN or something. You can, if you wanted to, you can create them. And so yes, it is a step in the right direction, but I'm not like jumping up and down with joy, because I know how limited in application they are ultimately. And so my focus is on a global response, but that doesn't mean that it's not a step in the right direction. It's hard sometimes to get so enthusiastic because of the reality.
Yeah. And looking into the future, what more needs to be done to prevent NCII abuse? As you have stated, we do need more global coordination to really confront this issue. What do you think that looks like, and how do we go about organizing that?
So what needs to be done to tackle this issue? It is a big question. I sigh, because it's like, oh my God, at the thought, because ultimately a lot of the work survivors have had to do for so long, and they're going to have to do this. But I think ultimately we just need a multifaceted approach to tackling this issue, and you need so let's start there. You need like a multifaceted approach, recognizing that laws and regulations can only do so much when you're also talking about societal and cultural attitudes that really kind of permit this abuse to happen. You've got, misogynistic views that that are behind a lot of what happens. Perpetrators, research on perpetrators have found that they don't consider the agency, they don't consider the autonomy of the people that they target. And so we need really, really strong and effective educational campaigns in schools at young ages to really go after and really iron out these attitudes that are facilitating this abuse. And you also do need strong laws. You need laws that go after the creation, threatening, distribution, the solicitation, facilitating the exchange, profiting from this abuse. You need laws, and you need laws that actually work in practice and that are actually being enforced and people are actually being held accountable. And the system, the ecosystem and the network is actually being shut down, or the people behind it are being held accountable. And then you need to look beyond an individual country or individual territory or jurisdiction and figure out a way that law enforcement, governments, civil society can work together to hold people to account, to remove this content, and to actually hold people to account in terms of even in the justice systems there, whether people are extradited or there's kind of a recognition of judgments in different locations. You need to have some sort of system. I don't know exactly how that would work in practice, but there has to be some sort of coordinated system where people are held accountable, even if they're halfway around the world, for doing this, because this has lifelong, permanent consequences on an individual, and it makes me so frustrated that people can just do this and get away with it, and then you're just left to bloody deal with the consequences of what some person can do halfway around the world.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing what you know now, and after everything that you've gone through, what advice would you give to someone who's experiencing or has experienced NCII abuse?
What advice would I give? Well, I have talked about this before, but I'll repeat it again because it's worth repeating, that I don't like giving people false hope. And I also don't like depriving people of hope. And on the first point about giving false hope, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This form of abuse is a really, really dangerous form of abuse because it is really hard to tackle and it can affect you for life, and it's almost inescapable. And the systems that we have to get any kind of justice are so poor that I don't want to say that there's going to be justice, you're all going to be okay, the world's going to be better in time. I can't say that because it's not true, and it's part of the reason why we're getting so many people that are speaking out now and fighting back, because we're really at the vanguard. We're setting the trail, but at the same time, I don't want to deprive people of hope, because sometimes that's all you have. And I would say that, if I can do it, if other people can do it, there are ways to overcome, and it doesn't define you, and it's not your fault. And there are people who are fighting with you and for you, And so it would be that response, that it's not going to be easy. It's quite a difficult form of abuse to navigate, but that doesn't mean that it's the end of everything, because people and you can overcome it. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing this. I think you're super brave to be speaking out the way that you are and advocating for yourself and others.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deepfake Dialogues. If you found this conversation insightful, please follow and leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. See you in the next episode.